Explain the mealworm kits. What do the beetles do? Yes. Uh, oh, I'm dirty. Um, so the mealworms that you saw that I was working with there, those are the larvae. And what will happen is those are the protein sources, the things that folks usually feed to reptiles, poultry, stuff like that. What will happen is, in order for them to reproduce and continue existing, those larvae need to pupate, so they go into a middle form in between the larva and the adult. It's called a pupa. It's a little alien-looking thing. It's very similar to like caterpillars and butterflies, right? So the caterpillar goes into that chrysalis, stays there for a while, transforms into a butterfly. Same concept with mealworms. So the mealworm turns into the pupa. The pupa then hatches 4 to 19 days later as a beetle, and then within a week that beetle is mating and either laying eggs or mating with females. And then those beetles will lay the eggs, which continue the colony or continue the larva. So those eggs will then hatch into the larva, they grow, and the cycle repeats. So the purpose of the kit, pupa do not travel well. So when I ship live insects, and I do that every Monday, starting to do that on Tuesdays as well. So Monday I ship out, and what will happen is those larvae will get shipped out, and then if you want to raise your own mealworms, what some people will do is they'll sell you a kit with the larva, with the beetles, and with the pupa. What I found is that those pupa don't travel well. They get beat up real easy. They can't really do much as far as movement, so in the heat and the cold they can't regulate their temperatures very well, and they just die. And usually what happens is they, especially when anything insect-wise suffers from a heat scenario, they get to you and then they start dying. And so then you feel like you're doing something wrong, when really it was just they don't travel well. So that's where the beetles come in. So within the colony here, I'm constantly hatching fresh beetles. And you want fresh beetles because beetles will lay 95% of their eggs in the first 2 to 3 months of their life, depending on environment conditions. But after that, the females, they'll lay 90 to 95%. 500 eggs is generally the average that they'll lay, and then they'll live for months after that, but they're not doing anything. And so what you need to do from a colony perspective, if you want to maintain or grow, is you need to have beetles laying eggs. So I will ship out kits that have the larva and the freshly hatched beetles. I collect those beetles every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The Monday ones I keep for me. Those go into the colony. The Wednesday and the Friday get collected and then shipped out on Monday. Friday, if I can get all the orders out with the Friday beetles, that's great. If I can't, I'll mix them in with the Wednesday. And then by the time they get to you, so they'll leave my place on Monday, they're less than a week old. By the time they get to you, generally for most of the continental U.S., it takes about 3 to 4 days. In some cases, it's 1 to 2. And in some cases, it's 5 if there's an issue. But once they get to you, those beetles are then mature enough that they're ready to lay eggs and are probably already laying eggs in the newspaper in the bag that they're sent in. And then that way you've got a jump start on your colony. You've got the larvae that you can start feeding to whatever it is that you're raising them for. Don't feed them all. Hold some of those back so that they pupate. They will start pupating immediately for 2 reasons. One, stress of shipping. So you'll see a real increase in pupa, and then it'll slow back down, and you'll start to uptick again maybe a week after the slowdown. And that's just them responding to stress. Stress causes them to pupate. And 2, they're going to pupate because I don't treat anything with chemicals here. There are some folks that will apply what's called a juvenile hormone. It's a natural hormone to the mealworms, but you apply it in mass, in a very unnatural amount, volume, and basically what happens is that forces the larva to not be able to pupate. And so it just keeps growing and growing and growing, which if you're trying to raise your own mealworms, you don't want that. You want that larva to transition. But even if you're just buying those larvae to then feed to something, the pupa are good for 2 reasons. One, it shows that I'm not using chemicals. So if they pupate, I haven't applied chemicals, I'm not lying to anybody. And 2, the pupa actually have more protein than the larva. And so the larvae are usually the forms that folks will want to feed off, but that's because they just don't know that those pupa are actually more nutritious from a protein perspective than the larva. And so if you've got a reptile that's a little picky and they may not eat it, you can kind of wiggle it a little bit, the tail will wiggle, pinch it a little to incentivize it. Chickens will eat them up like crazy. but that's what the deal is with the mealworm kits. The beetles are there to lay eggs to give you a jump start. You don't have to do that. So if you want a colony and you want to start with just the larva, totally fine. So get those larvae, put them in a container. Anything with vertical sides that is clean, they can't scale. If it gets dirty, they're going to be able to climb it, especially the beetles. So you get those larvae and just start letting them pupate. Then they'll turn into beetles, and a week later they'll start to mate or lay eggs, and away you go. So you don't have to spend that money on the beetles with the kits if you don't want to. You can just get the larvae and go from there.